What does it mean to grow up in Uganda, East Africa, a country where most people know about Idi Amin only? They don't know any good thing. They don't know even there's a monk in Uganda. So I would like to share my experience. I grew up in a family. You can maybe correspond it to a middle class American. Especially my father was coming from middle class. My mother, less than middle class, but my father was really well placed in Uganda. He was a director of a company, building and construction company, which was owned by my uncle. So I was brought up in a well-privileged family, I can say. And my mother was very loving. My mother had 3 children, and they actually, I have 2 sisters. One died, there's one remaining, and is a half-sister. So for me, since I was the firstborn, my mother poured all her love to me. And though there was a lot of things in Uganda happening, and what stood out for me is the political climate at that time as I was growing up. There was a president called Idi Amin who has just assumed the office, at least when I started to understand about politics.
What age?
That time I was 5 years, and I remember my mother asking me to sit down and ask me a very serious question. She said, if people come around and ask you, who do you like most? The former president, Obote, or Idi Amin? I say, Obote. But for me, I could not make a distinction between the two. I didn't know even what it means to be a president. So my mother told me, never, never say Obote. They will take you. People will take you and they will kidnap you or so like that. She told me I should say Idi Amin. Then I asked, who's Idi Amin? And then just around the same time, some army people came to place around our town, and they were on a mission of looking for people who are really not obeying Idi Amin's orders. One of them was like Idi Amin had forbidden people to put on miniskirts, females, and they were looking for people who were putting miniskirts. Another thing, Idi Amin, for some reason, he didn't want people to put slippers in towns. And then he came to that town, commanded his army to find people who were wearing slippers and ask them to start eating them. That's what I remember as a kid. So I didn't feel so much of what dictatorship is because I was very young, at 5 years old, but at least I knew about Idi Amin from that time. And then I got to know that Idi Amin actually was responsible for the death of one of our relatives. And I heard that he gave orders, and they took him and they killed him, and they hid the body in the forest, and they had difficulties to find the body. Anyway, finally they found the body, and then they said that Idi Amin was responsible for that death. So for me, I grew up with that kind of image that Idi Amin is a very brutal person. But on the other side, my mother really tried to show me a lot of love, and that helped me up to now to find out what is it really mean to be brought up in Uganda with such a war-torn area. One thing, as my mother was bringing up, she was not actually forcing me to into different beliefs. She wanted me to stand on my own understanding. I remember one time giving me advice that if you have nothing to do, sleep. If you have nothing to talk to say, keep quiet. So for me, that's wonderful. That was wonderful, and she loved going to take a nap during the time. So she used to say, "Okay, come, don't go out and pray with the other people, other kids. So just come and sleep," because that's what she was doing. For me, I couldn't sleep. All the time I stayed awake. And I just experienced that space and silence because there was nobody to talk to. Actually, that molded me slowly by slowly to appreciate silence. And in my adulthood, when I left my mother, I went to the boarding schools and all that. I used to lock myself inside the room and I never talk with any other student. For many hours, people used to ask me, why were you locking yourself inside your room? But actually, I love to be by myself, alone and alone. That's what I love to do when I was growing up. Okay, it was a Christian setting. My father was a very devoted Christian, and he used to go to church every Sunday. There's no single Sunday which I didn't see my father going to church. What was the Catholic Christian denomination, which is very interesting because in Africa, Christianity also is mixed up with our African traditions. And when it comes to marriage, African people, they don't follow so much the Christian rules. In fact, many members of my family, including my mother, had many wives, actually. Many wives. So that's called polygamy, and it's very, very common in Africa. And for me, I just saw the difficulties that polygamy produces, like jealous and envy. It was not actually a good system as I was growing up because I got to experience this in our family itself, where my father had many wives. But one side, my mother, since loved me so much, always guided me how to live a life that is very quiet and silence by taking those moments to be alone. So when I used to go to school, Sunday school, this was part of the kids program who were not going to church. First we had the Sunday school. So they used to make us sing, clap, and all that. I enjoyed those songs, and that was getting into the group. But then, when I came back home, and my mother would say, "Oh, if you have nothing to do, just sleep. If you have nothing to say, keep quiet." So I used to have those quiet moments. So I was blending the silence with the songs that I was singing at the Sunday school during church service. So then I continued growing up. I passed the age of Sunday school. I had to attend church. So I used to go to church. I'm telling you, I missed the Sunday school because there was a lot of songs and joy and all that. And this church, there was kneeling down. I really didn't like to kneel down. The kneeling down, then the rosary. The rosary, actually, there was a lot of repetition, and later on I got over that. And it was repeating the same thing, Hail Mary, full of grace, may the Lord be with you. Actually, we continue on repeating that. But after a while, actually, there was that sense of calmness that I really liked very much. So actually, I enjoyed that portion of the rosary, repeating those phrases. It was a kind of concentration practice. So I continued doing that, and later on, I started getting into the boarding school. When I left my family in the boarding school, you have to really go far away from your family, and we are allowed to be visited. Maybe it was, I think, once a month. So they could visit us three times in a term. But since the school was far away, very far away, my mother and father didn't really actually visit me regularly. So I got isolated from my family. So that for me was a lesson of renunciation and detachment from my family, because the boarding school was far away from my family. And it was the best boarding school, one of the best schools in Uganda, called St. Henry's College Togo. That's when I went to high school.